think that's the beautiful thing about the Halloween season. You don't have to play or watch something in the horror genre to get into the vibe. Saying this because Scooby-Doo honestly is a cozy little nook in the greater world of monsters and mysteries. But now I would be repeating myself like the last time I did a video that featured the Talking Dane, that being Cyber Chase on PS1. I played a lot of Scooby-Doo Unmasked when I was a child. I not only played it at a friend's house to almost completion, stopping around the final few sets of levels in the museum, but I also rented it a number of times, though I can't remember if it was for the PlayStation 2 or the GameCube, since SDU released on everything that existed at the time. At the friend's house, it was definitely the PlayStation 2, but I owned the purple lunchbox and God's gift to the world, so I can't remember. I had a number of games for both consoles on top of whatever I rented, so some things do blend together. Anywho, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share the video around, and maybe hit up my Patreon to become a ticket holder for at least $1 to get your name in the credits, additional videos like thumbnail time lapses and the Showtime Reels, the scripts in their entirety, and more. Or don't, I ain't your Uncle Stilton. I'm more a rat than a mouse, and to call what I do journalism is laughable. I've been in this situation before, but if you want any information regarding artificial-minded movement, also known as A to M, who later readopted their Behaviour Interactive moniker, watch Let's Talk About Monsters, Inc. Scream Team. That fits with the Halloween vibe. A lot of what was said over there is prevalent to this video. There isn't a ton to pull from like usual with licensed games, as in between their own projects like 2005 Scalar and if any of you remember Naughty Bear or Wet, A2M was work for hire. This is a developer that could release up to 6 games a year on multiple different platforms, ranging from older consoles, what was current at the time, and handheld, so no wonder they announced they were going crunch-free around 2018 to 2019. Of course, I might be fully attributing this to the wrong place, as who knows how many hours, days, weeks, and years were spent making sure Dead by Daylight is less of a dumpster fire than it could be. It's probably more half and half the long hours on DVD drudging up bad memories of the older times when they only had about 3 months, maybe less, to get a product out the door. This makes me wonder if the work-for-hire business model was used to fund Artificial-Minded Movement's own projects. A lot like Jim Brown's character in Mars Attacks. They have more reverence for their own IPs as opposed to what they were contracted out for, at least is what I gather from Joystiq's interview with A2M CEO Remy Rancine. We were formed on an original IP called Jersey Devil. When you think about our roots, our first game on the console, PlayStation 1, was an original IP, and prior to that, we were an original IP shop doing Wallaby Jack on PC, but then we moved on to become a work-for-hire on licensed stuff. At the end of 2005, we felt like we had to go back to doing original IP with the appearance of the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 on the market. That means you could easily surmise that Scooby-Doo Unmasked was essentially a project THQ had flung at A2M for them to work on. Probably because the franchise had gone through a renaissance of sorts in the mid-2000s, and, well, money makes the world go around. You can point to earlier in the timeline, 1980s Zombie Island being the starting point of Scooby's return to the limelight, and I definitely remember watching a lot of What's New Scooby-Doo on Cartoon Network, which also reran the direct-to-video movies. Plus, there's the James Gunn film released in 2002, so I can surmise THQ, the publisher, and Warner Brothers, the rights owners of Scoob, wanted to capitalize on the newfound revival. Which, I mean, I feel like I could have said that for the last Scooby-Doo game I played. Capitalizing when the iron's hot? That makes way too much sense for this YouTube review show. Scooby-Doo Unmasked was merely a game developed by A2M in the year 2005, and not even the biggest one of that year for them. Ed, Edd, and Eddy Miss Adventure saw the light of day around the same time as Unmasked. No joke, Scooby was a September release worldwide, Ed Cubed was October in North America, November in PAL, and both games were released on all the same hardware: GameCube, PlayStation 2, Xbox, and Nintendo's portables. If you're wondering about the team background, it's a case of what I said back in Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories. A number of the people who worked on previous A2M licensed titles, as well as some outsiders who had recently joined the developer but had the same career trajectory, made up the team for Unmasked. There just isn't an interesting way for me to spin this. So, to cut to the chase, PCSX2 was my chosen avenue. Bet you weren't ready for me to say this. Our story begins, yes, Unmasked has a story, with Mystery Incorporated visiting animatronic and special effects company Monstrous Fright and Magic so that Fred and the gang can hang out with his cousin Jed. As the name implies, MFM specializes in monsters for film and TV use, that word causing Shaggy and Scooby to pull their usual routine to the other's jest. However, it seems like something other than the dogs have been let out, as when the team enters the main production building, the place is a mess. Splitting up to search for clues, a mystery playbook standard, has Scooby get surrounded by a whole battalion of knights, though before they can run him through with their swords, he's saved by Mr. Stanton and his assistant Marcy. They're not real monsters. Shine some UV light on them and they melt into mubber. This wonderful soy-based product is the foundation of Fright and Magic, so much so that Jed apparently tried to steal the formula for himself, among other items, so that he could probably start up his own studio, or so says Stanton.
With Mubber, Mr. Stanton has perfected the most lifelike special effects monsters ever.
And would you believe it even tastes good?
Yummy! Mr. Stanton, pleased to meet you. I'm Fred, this is Daphne, Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby-Doo. We're friends of Jed Jones.
Jed? That thief? Look around. He caused all this so he could steal my creations.
If Jed is relative to Fred, we all know he couldn't be responsible for these crimes. With the last known location of Fred's cousin being Chinatown, the gang heads off to solve this mystery, inadvertently stepping into another one. An old haunt, that being Zentuo and the Scare Pair, have put a kibosh on Chinatown's New Year celebration to the dismay of one Maggie G. It helps to have a dragon on your side. And seeing as she's the only character introduced via cutscene for Chinatown, yeah, she's the culprit. But instead of some... Do modern Scooby-Doo villains get sent to jail? It doesn't matter. Maggie G goes the way of the Incredible Melting Man. She was a mubber animatronic, with the mastermind taunting the gang through a handheld radio recovered from the puddle that was Maggie. Tracking the transmission, Mystery Incorporated are led to a rundown rock and roll theme park that has been taken over by the Guitar Ghoul, the mascot of the place. Alvin Wiener, the ghoul's self-proclaimed biggest fan, warns the gang of the Rockers' rampage, but that's an invitation to solve another mystery while looking for Jed. While snooping around for clues, Scooby and Shaggy bump into Nikki Starlight, another person wanting to get to the bottom of the Guitar Ghoul's antics. She seems to know the figure on a personal level, and that's because she is the ghoul. Or was. Back in the day, Nikki donned the guise for her band so that the music would stand on its own. Meanwhile, Alvin grew jealous of Nikki as while she achieved stardom, his band became a one-hit wonder. Oh, the tragic fate of opening acts. Wiener's casing, Mubber. Get it? Like Like a sausage? Sausage casing? Really glad I didn't make this hard for myself with a dick joke. Anywho, Nikki knows where the paper trail leads next. A museum newly renovated by MFM. Oh, and would you look at that? Museum curator Professor Stoker has a caveman problem. He's not the Neanderthal, surprisingly. It's security guard Mr. Grimm, who somehow worked a deal between himself and Monstrous Fright and Magic where he would be supplied mubber if the museum could be used to secretly pump oil. So that means Stanton sent the gang on a wild goose chase for Jen. I don't mean to be, perplexed, but there's just an oil subplot in this story that goes nowhere. What the fuck is that all about? What was I saying?
Restart.
Oh, yeah. So that means Stanton sent the gang on a wild goose chase for Jed. But no, actually, Marcy did. All because she was rightfully peeved off by Stanton's choice to take full credit for Mubber when it was a joint creation.
But you took all the credit for it. I thought that if I gave you a bad name, I could start up my own business. Mr. Stanton, is this true?
Marcy, I didn't know you felt this way. You should have talked to me about it. Destroying the reputation of Monstrous Fright and Magic would destroy Mubber. I'm sorry if I hurt you, Marcy. I'd like you to become a partner in the company. If you can forgive me, that is.
Yeah, I think I can do that.
One apology later, and probably a whole heap of reparations to be paid, all's well that ends well. The gang even rescued Jed, who is stuck in a Mubber Fishman costume. Our story ends. Yeah, it just ends. There's nothing else here. Go home now. We're done. I mean, what do you expect from a Scooby-Doo mystery? It's about as transgressive as blue jeans to a barbecue, and about as deep as a Penny Dreadful with the glue coming undone. The philosophical core of the series has always been lighthearted mysteries combined with wacky hijinks, owing to CBS's catering to parents who didn't want kids to watch violent superhero cartoons, with only a few versions of the show breaking away from that. Insert Mystery Incorporated for the best results, along with some of the movies, Velma and Return to Zombie Island for the drizzling shits. You can root out some social commentary out of the series. I recall a number of Scooby-Doo Where Are You episodes having landowners or the social elite be the de facto bad guy, trying to scare people off their property for some form of gain, and the modern stuff, aka the 90s revival to now, circa 2025, tends to be a teensy bit more thoughtful, but as the king of grasping at straws, yeah. At best, you can say that the series toys around with these ideas, as seen with Unmasked and the relationship between Stanton and Marcy, with how the former takes all the credit for Mubber, even though it was a joint creation. At worst, it mostly sweeps these elements under the rug and concludes with very little conflict, which Unmasked also does with the Mubber revelation, as it only exists in the last few moments of the story and is brought up simply to be resolved and have a happy ending. Another element that goes along with this is the petroleum being pumped at the museum. That goes nowhere and would frame MFM in a worse light, but Unmasked doesn't interrogate that thread for more than it needs to. I won't argue adverse to conflict. More, Scooby-Doo doesn't want to sit in that gray area. It's popcorn, pleasing to the palate, but absolutely light fluffy. Demonstrating this point, Stanton is a guy who has taken full credit for an industry revolutionizing invention, getting all the fame and glory, and working out some shady deals using his company name, while Marcy essentially gets left holding the bag. You could observe this through a lens of power imbalance. Stanton is an older man in the special effects industry and thus would have sway through money, respect, or fear, compared to Marcy, who is a younger woman without as many credentials. Sure, this nobody helped make Mother, and monsters are real. That would be the sentiment. You could assume that the field is male-dominated to complete this circle. It doesn't take a logical assumption to see why Marcy did what she did. Correlating this, Nikki Starlight and Alvin Wiener's relationship is born from the same vat, with the latter wanting to undermine the former since his band wasn't as successful, while she created the ghoul as a means to keep the focus on the music. Jealousy born from emasculation. His name is Wiener, after all. But then, I would be attributing factors not present within the plot or characters to the story. Assumption and theory crafting are merely that. Analysis needs to be informed of the subject it is covering, while having the due diligence to draw upon the material to inform and strengthen presented points. I wouldn't critique a child's drawing to the same level as Da Vinci's Mona Lisa. You could, but that would be an exercise in futility, and in a word, pretentious. There's a time and place for everything. Scooby-Doo Unmasked doesn't warrant an analysis greater than this. If anything, I'm more perplexed that Mystery Inc. doesn't recognize the older monsters they've had to deal with. Zentuo and the Scare Pair are a classic SD caper, as is the Ghost Clown and Suit of Armor that appear in the theme park and museum respectively, so either this is the first time the gang has ever seen them, or they don't acknowledge that factoid. Or, for the simple answer, which I can give to the above as well as in regards to the plot going nowhere, Unmasked is a game on a budget. Let's do something simple while including some iconic designs. I think one of the better parts of Unmasked happens to be the presentation, at least on a visual front when it comes to the characters. What a loaded statement that is. Before I continue with my gripes, there is a soft shell shading on all the characters that helps them to stand out from the drab and dreary locales the gang seems to find themselves in. That was always my personal grievance with the original Where Are You show, for as colorful and zany as the characters tended to be, the backdrops blended together with shades of dark greens, blues, and other dull selections. I get that most of the places that Mystery Inc. visits are abandoned plots of land, or are at least somewhat normal and grounded, but there's a reason why I think I, and maybe by extension you, tend to remember the monster of the week as opposed to where an episode took place in. Is it bad? The singular location that comes to my mind is the amusement park Charlie the Robot went crazy in. Unmasked is harkening back to an older era of Scooby-Doo with all the positives and negatives that come with. The cast all look great, returning back to their original designs as opposed to the revamped ones from once new, and are some of the best virtual representations of the Scooby Gang, but then you see the levels they traipse around in, and it's as appealing as staring into a 3 feet deep puddle of mud.
Shrimps!
Now let's see what we have here. Maybe the dragon is hiding in the sewers.
You should find your friend quickly and leave before it's too late.
Okay. Hello, fishy fish. Scooby-Doo! monster! Scooby-Doo! Hot! Help! Drown!
Chinatown is this boring gradient of browns, occasionally spruced up by milder deep greens. The amusement park feels like it has a moss filter over most of the levels, with only the museum having any saturation in all its stages. That's not to say that all the levels outside the museum are snore-inducing on a chromatical scale. I do like the big top tent for the park, but a spark of color was definitely needed, which is a shame because theming-wise, the levels and worlds are all pretty solid for the most part. Sure, the sewers is but one in a long line of poo water stages, but I do like the Jade Garden that caps off Chinatown because it plays to the aesthetic of the location. Likewise, all the places in the theme park are attractions, like a haunted house, a water park, or carnival tent. It feels like you're seeing behind the scenes. Each of the stages in the museum are exhibits with a particular focus. All you fight in the dinosaur exhibit are dinosaurs, while in the medieval display, you fight exclusively knights. While I'll mechanically run them down later on in the video, I do like that the enemy roster tends to go with either the theme of the world or are unique to a stage. You mostly fight martial artists in Chinatown, though don't ask why a ninja is in the lineup. You have groupies as the basic mob in the theme park, with a strong man and clown appearing in the circus areas, and I've already gone over the museum. Speaking of, almost every monster in the game comes from the original show or later incarnations, as with the pterodactyl from the second live-action movie, and much like the cast, look pretty good. There is some thought to how areas should look, but only in a half-assed measure. It's still better than the audio, which is batting a 0.3 average. Musically and sound effects-ly speaking, this is peak forgettable. Most of the SFX are stock, with the only notable one being the swing sound, as that particular effect was used in Sonic Adventure for Tails' tail attack. It's traditional cartoon sound effects, but it makes the whole product seem cheap. Like the music. It's there to fill in the background, and while it does a good enough job at doing that, if that's the positive I'm giving, you tell me what the lasting impression is. The best part about how the sound effects are implemented is that there is a laugh track used during the cutscenes to emulate watching Where Are You? That's about the only thing that stands out. However, voice cast wise, this is what you expect from something Scooby-Doo related. Scott Ines, Frank Welker, Gray Delisle, and Mindy Cohen still put in the work for Mystery Incorporated, and the extended cast isn't that bad either, Adam West making a guest appearance as Mr. Stanton. If they were trying to replicate one of the shows, it was on point, which, like I said, is the dual nature of Unmasked. What it takes from Where Are You are both its positives and negatives, making it a bizarre embodiment of Scooby-Doo to the point that it kneecaps itself for replication, while also reminding you why you probably like the series, if that observation makes any sense. I guess for an analogy, it's like visiting a restaurant you liked as a child as an adult. You see what was so great, but also notice the rougher edges and failures. Scooby-Doo Unmasked is a 3D platformer about this side to being a mascot collectathon platformer, and I think that kind of sets the tone for this tab, as if you're wondering about difficulty, there barely is any to speak of. In fact, this might be one of the easiest games that I've played on the channel, which is funny when you compare it to the last Scooby-Doo title I've covered. Cyberchase was a practitioner of CBT, while Unmasked is that guy too afraid to tell the cashier his burger had tomato on it when he specifically asked for it not to. But enough about me and daily life. SBU, as I might refer to it, is split between two elements when going over structure: hubs and stages. Beginning a new game has you start off in a stage, that being Monstrous Fright and Magic, which is also the final stage. But after you finish the level, you are dumped off in the first hub, Chinatown. Make no mistake though, Unmasked is linear in structure even if you can choose to replay a level. You can't revisit hubs at all, so you better grab everything in them before you leave one. Each hub has 3 levels and a boss you have to beat sequentially. So Chinatown has the Cookie Factory, the sewers, and the Jade Garden, ending with Zentuo's Dragon, with the next stage in a world only unlocking after you beat the previous one while finding its clue. Capital C, if you're asking, as these are basically the power stars from Super Mario or a box of Scooby Snacks from Cyberchase. In fact, I think you can't beat a stage unless you collect its main clue, as I should specify, as clues are but one of the 4 major collectibles in the game. The quartz set are clues, ingredients, traps, and costume upgrades. Clues are split into 2 groups. Main clues, which are used to unlock levels, typically are awarded or found by the player at the end of a stage, and are used in a pseudo-closing argument section that Velma presents to the player so that they can unlock the boss of the world. Don't worry, this isn't a brain teaser and you have infinite tries. References to Danganronpa aside, throughout a level you can also find optional clues. These open up elements in the hub so you can find some of the other collectibles that loiter there, specifically ingredients and costume upgrades. Of the 4, only the costume upgrades are unique to the hubs. You'll only find traps and clues in levels, while ingredients are split between both. Ingredients, which make up a bulk of the 4 major collectibles, are given to Shaggy in the hubs, which Tangent Mystery Inc. does populate the hubs if you want dialogue from them, and there's always a cutscene with them after you beat a level, generally pointing you to the next stage, so that Scooby can increase his health. While he starts off with 3 medals, aka hit points, by giving Shaggy an exponential amount of ingredients, can you up the cap to a maximum of about 13? Exponentially, as you'll always need to give the stoner more food items per health tier. So for 4 hit points, it's around 2 ingredients, then it jumps up to 3, then 5, etc, etc. Traps, the most useless of the collectibles, unlock enemy bios, and there's only 1 per stage. Getting all 3 of them across the board unlocks that world's boss bio, with all bios accessed from the Mystery Machine. May I elucidate you on the fact that you get nothing for 100%? Yeah, costume upgrades are the last of the 4, and are what they say on the tin. But this leads me to talking about the specifics of gameplay. Scooby himself has a pretty standard moveset. Off of PS2 controls, he has a jump and double jump handled by X, a spin attack with square, a slide off circle while he's moving, obviously left control stick is movement, right is camera, a roll if he's jumped once, and a belly flop if he double jumped. There are a few miscellaneous controls. I think triangle was the HUD button, but those are the faces to keep track of. Important to note, each of Scooby's attacks have a differing damage value. Spin deals 1 pip, roll and slide 2, and belly flop 3. Oh, and jump is an attack as well, tied with spin, if you feel like being an Italian plumber. Going through a stage, you're kind of funneled into going one direction, but sometimes there'll be a platforming challenge, a puzzle for you to solve, enemies blocking your way, and relatively speaking, the collectibles are hidden, so you'll be jumping up and down and all around. And that's not to mention specific level gimmicks, how big the stages are, as they're made up of multiple segments symbolized by transitions, or the costumes that you'll have to use. I said major, and that's because there are 3 other items you'll be Captain Klepto for. Scooby Snacks, boxes of Scooby Snacks, and Mubber. Both versions of Snacks heal back one of Scooby's medals, except boxes will heal immediately, while you'll need to obtain 100 free floating Scooby Snacks to get the same effect. That said, Scooby Snacks act as breadcrumbs to guide the player in the right direction. You can find them in breakable environmental objects like boxes or scenery items, and stocking up 100 snacks while you're at full health will have it act as an additional hit point. Mubber, though sometimes found in breakables, is mostly dropped by enemies or enemy spawners on death. Split into 2 groups, you have pest animatronics like rats and spiders, and human animatronics that are far sturdier and have a wider range of attacks as opposed to simply getting in your face for melee. Human-sized threats still do that, but they might have a ranged attack or a specialty move. Granted, Scooby only takes 1 point of damage from anything that could hurt him. Falling into a pit, 1 point. Blasted by a steam vent, 1 point. Bit by a rat, 1 point. That means dying is actually quite hard, and all that does is send you to one of the many checkpoints that a stage has. As to why you need Mubber, it's used at these contraptions either to unlock a costume to use or to give you an ingredient. Those that award foodstuffs are usually at the end of a stage, mind you. Costumes are the main gimmick of Unmasked and are given to the player once they reach a certain point in the hub, a costume switching up Scooby's moveset to allow him to circumvent costume-sensitive puzzles while also giving him an edge in combat. You can't choose what costume a Mubber contraption will give the talking dog, and neither can you take a costume past any point that has UV light shining down. They degenerate the costume back to its base components, i.e. you get some Mubber refunded. With 3 costumes in total, I'll run them down. Kung Fu is the combat-oriented suit, having quicker and stronger attacks, though it can blast through crumbled walls with its Scooby-Dooby-Ha. This attack replaces all of Scooby's circle moves, dealing the same point value as the belly flop, though instead of the spin while in the air, Scooby does get a dive kick. Bat doesn't change any of Scooby's attacks, but it does give him a glide, holding down X, that can be used to ride air currents. Robin Hood is pretty self-explanatory, switching out circle moves with a ranged option, dealing 3 damage akin to the flop or Skodoken, with a number of its obstacles being buttons that can be shot. Upgrade-wise, Kung Fu replaces the dive kick with a ground pound that has AoE, Bat has... and Robin Hood fires 3 arrows spread shot style instead of 1. Iron Eye, eat your heart out. While you may think that the costumes might be used during the boss fights, only 2 bosses actually do this, the dragon and the pterodactyl, both of which are a wait for it to be vulnerable kind of fight. The Kiss Demon requires you to spin spiders at him to break up his mirror so he's vulnerable, while the Caveman feels like it belongs in Crash Bash. It's bumper cars with power-ups. These are phased fights, as in once you reach a certain health value, the boss will either do new attacks or quicken the pace of the fight, though their health bars are not sectioned off as such. Like I said earlier, you get nothing from 100% besides the satisfaction, so That's on you if you want to find everything. Compounding this, completing Unmasked and leaving the credits has your ass unceremoniously dumped back to the title screen, where the only other thing you can do is look at concept art. Hooray? I don't know if this speaks about the quality of the game, but Scooby himself has some neat movement in Unmasked. Or you can pull off some unintentional movement abilities if you know how to time them right. What I mean by that is that Scooby has a roll attack performed by doing a singular jump in the air, then hitting circle. Not only is it a decently damaging attack, hurting for 2 pips of health against most enemies, it gives him a bit of forward movement without any ending lag. This is different from when you just hit circle while on the ground, as that is the slide, which also does 2 points of damage and has the mother of all lingering hitboxes, but has notable ending lag as it locks you in place slightly. It effectively kills any forward movement you had, which sucks, unlike how the roll actually gives you momentum as you perform it. So how do you retain that and go fast? Simple. You alternate between rolling and jumping. When a roll ends, and I'm talking about the exact few frames that it is over, you are allowed to jump. As long as you've done a single jump, you can roll regardless of how close you are to the ground. By finding the rhythm between jumping and rolling, as there is a somewhat tight window, I don't think it's frame 1 to do this tech, but there isn't a lot of wiggle room. You can speed right through levels and the overworlds in a somewhat fun manner. Was this intended? Probably not, but much like all the tech in Smash Melee, the glitch that makes Juggernaut great in MVC2, and a bunch of other technical undersights in other video games, we take those where we can. Especially with how spacious some of Unmasked stages can be. I do like the gimmick of the game, that being the costumes that apply different attributes to Scooby. My only wish is that there were either more of them, or they had a greater focus. 3 costumes for 3 worlds isn't nearly enough in my eyes. One of them gets entirely relegated to combat, which is mindless despite all the mechanics it has, leaving only the Robin Hood and Bat get-ups feeling like they have any uniqueness, with the former's puzzle solving by shooting targets, and the latter's extended platforming sections, and there's barely any crossover, if a level even decides to have a costume play a part. There are a good amount of set pieces in the levels for me to remember them, like the sewers and water park having slides to cap off the stage, the haunted house and its usage of the ride cars being pivotal to platforming, though I will return to this one, the Jade Garden and its gongs, the multitude of 2.5D platforming like this is Crash Bandicoot or some parts of Mesa City and Sly Cooper 1, the Big Top Tense finale on the high wire and the aquatic exhibit's focal point on the submarine, among others. But of all those that I listed, only the last 2 involve a costume. The rest are simple level gimmicks that are mutually exclusive to whatever shape Scooby is in. There needed to be more cross-pollination, or have a level requiring a multitude of costumes to finish. I think that's why I find the final boss to be the best out of the bunch. In fact, of the 4, it is the one of 2 that needs a costume to defeat, as you switch between all 3 for the different phases of the giant pterodactyl. It gives them interplay instead of being separate entities that only factor in some of the time. Like, imagine if there was a level-wide puzzle that required all 3 costumes to complete. That would be the neatest thing, having to take advantage of Robin Hood's projectile to knock down a platform, for Bat to glide over so that it could hit a switch to lower a ladder, for Kung Fu to climb so that it could break a wall. The fundamental problem with the costumes is that they are drip-fed to you, so a world stages have to be designed with a specific one in mind, when I think you should have given them all to the player, sans upgrades, then design worlds from that viewpoint of being able to switch for what is needed. It wouldn't even break intended level structure or flow, because you could still make the player look high and low for clues to acquire the upgraded forms for added utility. You simply add more UV lights to stop players from breaking the levels. The upgrades are another neat idea in theory, offering up bonuses for a costume when it is in use, but in practice, the only one worth mentioning is Robin Hood's, as it affords you to be less accurate. The ground pound for Kung Fu is nice, especially when you have to do the enemy gauntlets, but it replaces the dive kick, which has the same hokey movement that the roll has, so guess which one I like more. I do love me some Dr. Doom. Bat doesn't get any noticeable changes besides a facelift, so yeah. Maybe the glide is better? You don't need the upgrades, but the costumes don't feel any more powerful when you do have them, begging the question of why I should even go after them. Are we sure this is the good section with all the complaining I've been doing? I feel like that is the crux of Unmasked. A backhand for my forehand. Case in point, combat. All of Scooby's attacks do a specific amount of damage. His spin does 1, as does his jump on human-sized monsters. His slide and roll do 2, as does the jump on pest-sized threats. And his belly flop plus all costume special attacks do 3. And there's positives and downsides to each. The spin is the easiest move to pull off, but it does the least amount of damage, and certain foes can block it. The roll and slide need to be aimed and can be equally blocked, but they hit harder than the spin. And finally, the flop and a number of special attacks are slow and need wind up but hit the hardest. Not every enemy is created the same either. Some can block, some attack from range, they run the gamut. The most interesting threat is the Electric Ghost, because you have to defeat him with Robin Hood's arrows as he hurts Scooby on contact. The rest can be bullied without a thought because they're so passive and can be easily stun locked. So why do attacks have different values? Let's just get to it. Combat did not need to be a main focus of the game. All that I said above and good. Yeah, let's elaborate on that forehand with the back. Yes, attacks do have different damage values and speeds, meaning technically there is a time and place for each move. A quick spin to get a group of pests off you, a roll or slide to hit blocking enemies, or to keep moving while doing an attack. The belly flop for the most damage. That seems all well and good, but none of this matters unless you are fighting pests, simply because jumping on them is the fastest way to kill the spiders and rats. Why don't damage values matter? Because enemy reactions for human-sized threats are split between 2 categories: knockback and knockdown. The first occurs when you either spin or jump on them, where they typically react like they're Simon Belmont before they either decide to go into guard stance if they have one, or by immediately striking back. You should never jump or spin against any large targets, which I must mention are the most common mob type in Unmasked, because using any other move will knock them down for a brief period, allowing you to follow up with another attack. It doesn't matter what animatronic you go up against or what they do, because you can clear them out all the same. Oh no, a Kung Fu girl with a hair whip attack. Slide or roll, rinse, repeat until death. A ninja with throwing stars. Slide or roll, rinse, repeat until death. A fire-breathing groupie, a strong man with shockwaves, a clown that might as well be a reskin of the ninjas, a flying pterodactyl, and a knight. Slide or roll, because both attacks cause the knockdown state, allowing you to loop any attack that causes the reaction, as you don't have to use the slide or roll, they're just faster than the stronger options like the flop or special attacks, gimping any kind of diversity the monster roster may have had. Why I highlighted the Electric Ghost isn't because he's fun to fight. He's the only enemy in the game that doesn't suffer from being looped, and I would clarify barely, since you have to hurt him with Robin Hood's arrows lest you take contact damage. The Electric Ghost is a dull damage sponge, but at least I can't cheese him like everyone else and have to actively engage in combat if, as I mentioned Barely. I asked, on this desolate Earth, why are there a bunch of combat gauntlets then? A number of times, at least once per world, do you get locked into an area of a stage and have to fend off a number of enemies until you clear the allotted amount out. Not only is this a time killer, seriously, they all stop dead the flow of any given stage, but it's monotonous too. Couldn't we have more platforming challenges or area puzzles? This is where Mubber is an annoying resource because you need a lot of it for both costumes and ingredients, so you can't skip out on fighting. And 100 gods forbid you have to replay a stage because you'll have to replay these segments, so if what you missed was on the other side of a gauntlet, there's no way around except through. Speaking of missing items, a number of these stages are a bit too big for their own good, making 100%ing a task not worth the effort as there's no reward besides appeasing your OCD, slightly more tedious than it needs to be. I can forgive you for missing either the traps or ingredients. The former has no apparent reason to exist, as the enemy bios reek of the bar they were written in and don't offer any information you didn't already know, while the latter runs up against the game's challenge or lack thereof. More health is nice in that you can damage boost, but having more than 5 hit points, Scooby starts with 3 on a new game, felt beyond superfluous since everything in Unmasked is so blasé. Death is cheap in that checkpoints are all over the dang place. I've already spoken about the mobs and their problems, leaving only the obstacles and bosses. If you play it slowly, you'll never be in a position that a stage hazard will kill you. In fact, why I took so much damage from levels was because I had extra health to spare and didn't want to wait, and while bosses do restart from the beginning if you die, only the caveman does that matter because he's a messy bumper car boss with poorly implemented physics. More health trivializes whatever the intended difficulty of Unmasked was, a game that was already on the easy side, and it's not like enemies do more damage the later you go on in the adventure. Everything will always deal 1 point of health to Scooby, from getting attacked by an enemy to falling into a pit. Having a health upgrade system in Unmasked is a bizarre inclusion, and my only thought process for the reason why it's here is so that little kids, who might not be the best at playing video games, can have something to fall back on. But then why is the checkpointing and times you have to fight so lenient? Why are Scooby snacks everywhere for you to pick up? Also, why not give Scooby a fixed health bar? And even if my train of thought has some kernel of truth, I doubt little kids would have an easy or even a fun time searching high and low for ingredients and by extension clues. I knew I was in the weeds when I got to the haunted house, the first level of the theme park's level set. It's this sprawling, massive complex split between segments that is easy to overlook collectibles in because you have to double back up parts or fiddle around with interactables to uncover hidden rooms which might not be obvious to the player. The bookshelves and their goodies are only in this one stage. No other level has a mechanic like this, so if you don't hug all of them, you might not know where a clue or ingredient is. That's on top of figuring out which area an item might be in, as you have the interior and exterior, but the inside is split between higher and lower areas that you have to go outside to alternate between. So if you accidentally or intentionally fall to a lower area indoors, that's a trip outside, a big section of the haunted house in its own right to get back to where you were. And since you also have the roller coaster cars to deal with, either by timing your movement or by using them to ride to new locations, you can spend a good chunk of time in the haunted house waiting around. A number of levels post this keep to the haunted house's formula, so if you have to return to a previous stage, in case you missed a collectible, be prepared for the height of boredom and frustration. Further marred by a few levels having points of no return, like the aquatic exhibit in the museum or sewers in Chinatown. You reach the biplane or slide sections without grabbing everything in those levels, go back to start and replay the whole thing. Just the worst when it comes to collectathons. The only positive I can give is that progress is tracked by collectibles, so if you find one you were missing, you can quit out to the World Hub through the menu without having to beat the level. Truly a band-aid on a stab wound. Scooby-Doo Unmasked is an alright game. It has a few neat gimmicks, like the costumes and the upgrades changing their functionality, the range of movement Scooby has that you can exploit, and the willingness to emphasize certain elements of the gameplay to make stages stand apart, whether through basing a level around a specific idea or by having a set piece, but it shows its licensed nature on the sleeve. Combat shouldn't have been the main focus with this cookie-cutter and interchangeable roster that falls apart at the slightest hint of aggression. The only real worthwhile collectible at a certain point becomes the clues that unlock costume upgrades, since Unmasked difficulty doesn't warrant a need to increase Scooby's health past 2 additional hits. In fact, it kneecaps the already middling challenge as you can damage boost through certain sections without a care, and the traps might as well not exist since enemy bios are barroom napkin scribbles. Besides, with how some of these items are laid out, it isn't worth the hassle to find them if all you're getting is a mild headache on investment. 100% is filling out a spreadsheet for the sake of seeing a number go up. I need more incentive than that. At the end of the day, though, I can't hate Unmasked, nor can I like it. It's an average licensed game that doesn't push boundaries and plays it safe. Dime a dozen in a sea of infinity. I've played better and worse. You've played better and worse. It's not a hidden gem, but it isn't a learning experience either. Merely okay, though an argument can be made that is a fate worse than being beloved or reviled. Love and hate elicit strong emotions, but apathy is the total absence. One word: forgotten. The irony's not lost on me. Yeah, my taste in platformers, or rather my distaste for them now as an adult, was probably battered by the amount I played as a child and just how kinda middling a lot were. There were the obvious darlings. I am a Spyro guy more than Crash, though I do like the games I played of both, not counting the Titan sub-series for the Bandicoot. I still think Sly Cooper is my favorite mascot out of the booms that stuck traditionally to being a platformer, as Ratchet's more a third-person shooter, and I do think the genre is healthy with both high-end releases and indies, but I was deep in that trench with the likes of Chicken Little on GameCube, Unmasked and Cyber Chase, that 3D Aladdin game on PlayStation 1. I think I played that Ice Age Meltdown game on PlayStation 2, Jimmy Neutron Jet Fusion, and just so many other titles lost to history because they made little to no impact. I have witnessed a ton of licensed titles enter my video game consoles because I was the one to put the disc in them. And let's not leave out the abominations of the genre like Earthworm Jim 3D or Spyro Enter the Dragonfly. I've suffered both. I guess this is like my relationship with golf. Anywho, this show is made possible with the likes of the moviegoers within the Peanut Gallery and Inner Circle. Consider buying a ticket at patreon.com/Let's Talk About Games, no apostrophe in the Let's, for behind the scenes access to LTA scripts, thumbnails, other bonus material, your name in the credits, and early screenings of episodes, plus the live commentary Showtime Reels where I ramble my way through games gone by. As said at the top, like, comment, subscribe, share, become a ticket holder, or don't. I ain't your Uncle Stilton. And as always, this showing of Scooby-Doo Unmasked is over, but stay tuned for our next feature. An actually good platformer that I have hang-ups with, Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage.